Hey everyone, welcome to Bored and Sleepy Tales, the channel where slow, quiet stories help you unwind, clear your mind, and drift into the most peaceful sleep you've had all week. But tonight, we have something special. It's still calm, it's still soothing, but it carries a mystery that has puzzled historians for centuries. A secret library, a lost vault, and a czar whose past refuses to stay silent. Ivan the Terrible. Some say this library held knowledge powerful enough to change history. Some say it never existed at all. And some believe it's still hidden beneath Moscow to this very day. So get comfortable. Let the day fade away. And follow me into a story that's quiet, ancient, and just mysterious enough to keep you listening all the way through. This is the tale of the lost library of Ivan the Terrible. Let's begin. The story begins in silence. Not the silence of emptiness, but the kind that waits. Deep beneath Moscow, under the red walls of the Kremlin, there are corridors older than stone. And in those corridors, they say, a library once breathed. A secret library. The library of Ivan the Terrible. Its name was whispered, Liberia. Some said it came from the word liber, meaning book. Others, from Libya. Because the scrolls were so ancient, they were thought to come from the sands of Egypt. But no one could say for sure, because no one ever saw it, not truly. They said it was hidden in a sealed chamber behind a door of iron, and that the Tsar himself, fierce, brilliant, unpredictable, would sometimes disappear for hours below the palace, returning with ink on his fingers and the look of a man who had seen ghosts made of parchment. According to legend, the library was not Russian at all. It was older, much older. When Constantinople fell in 1453, and the last emperor of Byzantium fled the burning city, he carried with him a treasure, scrolls, tablets, manuscripts, written in Greek, Latin, Hebrew, and tongues that no one could name. His daughter, Sophia Palaiologina, married Ivan III, the grandfather of Ivan the Terrible, and with her she brought the books. Knowledge older than empires, and perhaps dangerous. Ivan was a man of contradictions. Cruel, yes, but also deeply curious. He read Aristotle and Augustine, the Psalms and the pagan poets. He feared God, but not questions. And in the heart of his fortress, he built a vault. There, in the candlelight, he surrounded himself with centuries of thought. Plato beside apocryphal gospels, Egyptian scrolls beside Nordic myths. He believed that in those books lay the secret of kingship, how to rule not just men, but fate itself. Some claimed that the books contained forbidden science, alchemy, prophecy, astronomy beyond the church's blessing. Others said they were simply too beautiful to destroy. So he hid them, buried them in the deep, and sealed the passage with his own sigil. Then came time, and time does what fire cannot. It forgets. Palaces rose, tunnels collapsed, rulers changed. The library's existence became a rumor, then a story, then a dream. But sometimes, when Moscow sleeps beneath snow, and the river freezes into silence, the workers repairing old foundations say they hear something, not voices, not wind, but a slow, rhythmic whisper, like pages turning, one by one, far below. Archaeologists searched. They found chambers, indeed, corridors of red brick under the Kremlin hill, traces of iron doors, fragments of candle soot, but no books, no scrolls, just air that feels old, older than Russia itself. Some believe Ivan burned the library before his death, fearing it would fall into foreign hands. Others insist he took its secret with him, that the entrance lies beneath the Cathedral of the Archangel, behind a sealed wall where the light never reaches. But perhaps the library was never meant to be found. Perhaps it is not a place, but a state of memory, the part of the mind that holds what the world has chosen to forget. Every civilization has one, a hidden archive of lost thoughts. So tonight, if you listen closely, you might hear the faint rustle of pages beneath the world. Not the past calling back, but knowledge waiting patiently for someone quiet enough to remember it. The story begins not in Russia, but in the dying light of Byzantium. When Constantinople fell in 1453, its walls cracked like an ancient bell, and the echo rolled eastward. Among the smoke and broken domes, men carried what could still be saved: icons, scrolls, and the whispers of 1,000 years. Knowledge fled the city before the fire reached it. Some treasures crossed the sea, some vanished in the dust, and one small caravan, escorted by weary guards and silent priests, began a long road north. At its heart rode a young woman, Sophia Palaiologina, niece of the last Byzantine emperor. Her marriage had been arranged far away, in a land she had never seen, Moscow, where snow replaced marble, and faith burned colder, but no less bright. With her came trunks of silk, icons in silver frames, and several heavy chests sealed with the imperial crest. Inside, they said, were books older than any church in Rus, books written in Greek, Latin, Hebrew, and some in scripts that even the monks could not name. The chests arrived quietly. There was no triumphal parade, no public record of their contents. The Grand Prince Ivan III accepted them with solemn courtesy. To most, they were merely dowry, a gift from the ruins of an empire. But to Sophia, they were something more, the last breath of a world that had fallen into the sea. In the high-walled Kremlin, under the dim light of wax candles, the books were unpacked. The air filled with the smell of dust and salt, as if the sea itself had been folded between the pages. Greek letters shimmered in gold ink. Miniatures glowed like trapped sunlight. The scribes crossed themselves and looked away. They could not read the words, yet they felt the weight of centuries pressing from the parchment. Sophia watched in silence. Each volume was a fragment of her lost homeland, the voice of philosophers, mathematicians, priests, and poets whose cities now smoldered in ruin. She asked that the chests be sealed again and placed beneath the palace chapel, where knowledge and prayer might share one air. There they remained, hidden from the court, guarded only by darkness and time. Years passed. Moscow grew richer, its cathedrals whiter, its bells louder. Few remembered the foreign bride who had come with strange books. But sometimes at night, servants swore they heard sounds beneath the chapel. Soft, like the rustle of turning pages. No one went to look. In those years, silence was safer than curiosity. By the time Sophia's grandson, Ivan the Terrible, was born, the library had already sunk into legend. Some said it had been moved to another chamber, deeper, sealed behind stone. Others whispered that it grew larger on its own, that new books appeared without hands to write them. And still others believed that whoever opened those chests again would awaken something older than Russia itself. And so the first chapter closes, not with an ending, but with a breath held beneath the earth. Somewhere under the old stones of the Kremlin, A few forgotten chests wait in the dark. They do not sleep. They remember. In the early years of his reign, Ivan was a boy surrounded by shadows. The Kremlin was both cradle and cage, a place of whispers, iron keys, and sleepless nights. Power was still in the hands of the boyars, and the corridors of the palace carried more intrigue than prayer. Yet even then, among the echoing halls and cold stone floors, Ivan found something that belonged only to him, a door that led down. He discovered it by accident, chasing a stray cat through a half-forgotten passage near the palace chapel. Behind a warped wooden panel, he found a narrow stairwell curling into darkness. The air smelled of dust and candle wax, like time itself exhaled there. And when his torchlight touched the walls, he saw carved Greek letters, faint, as if the stones themselves were trying to remember. Ivan returned many times in secret. He brought no guards, no priests, only a candle and his own restless curiosity. The stairway led to a small chamber, half-buried and cold. There were broken shelves, the remains of iron clasps, and one chest, sealed with wax so old it had turned the color of bone. He broke the seal one winter night, when the snow outside muffled all sound. Inside were scrolls wrapped in silk, books bound in leather so brittle that the pages cracked at the edges. Some were written in Cyrillic, early translations of scripture and law. But others were in tongues he did not recognize, angular, flowing, covered with diagrams of stars and circles, letters drawn like constellations. Ivan could not read them, but he could feel them. He sensed the rhythm of thought behind the letters, patterns, geometry, meaning that hummed beneath comprehension. He began to visit the vault more often, memorizing symbols, tracing diagrams by candlelight. The boy who had been powerless now held secrets older than kings. Years passed, and the boy became a ruler. He built, he conquered, he punished, he prayed. But he never spoke of the room beneath the chapel. At times, his advisors noticed ink stains on his fingers, or fragments of parchment on his desk with shapes no one could decipher. He called it, "My grandmother's dowry." No one dared to ask more. Some claimed he had found in those pages prophecies of his own reign, that the books foretold fire, empire, and blood. Others whispered that he sought alchemy, a way to command both matter and soul. But the truth, perhaps, was simpler. Ivan hungered for order. In a world of betrayal and chaos, the lines and symbols of the old manuscripts offered something unchanging, knowledge untouched by politics or mercy. When plague swept through Moscow, Ivan retreated underground. Chroniclers say he prayed there for days, surrounded by the relics of forgotten empires. Some thought he was hiding from death. Others believed he was studying it. The vault became his sanctuary, his confessional, his mirror. He spoke to the walls as if they could answer. And sometimes, when he emerged, pale and trembling, he spoke of light. A light that burns behind the page, he called it. A radiance that could not be extinguished by time or sin. Those who served him began to notice changes. He spoke in riddles, mixing prayers with fragments of ancient phrases. He demanded the rebuilding of cathedrals in strange geometric forms, domes aligned with constellations no one could name. And when he signed decrees, he often drew a small symbol beside his name, a circle crossed by 3 lines, like the intersection of worlds. What he found in that hidden library, no one truly knows. But as his reign darkened, so did the whispers. Some said he had seen a vision in those pages, not of God, but of himself, crowned and alone in a burning world. After that, he locked the vault forever, and the stairway was sealed again. Yet, deep beneath the Kremlin, something remained. The air still held the scent of wax and dust, of thought long extinguished but never gone. And those who walk near the cathedral at night sometimes feel a faint vibration under their feet, as if the stones themselves are remembering. When the storms of Ivan's youth had calmed, when the crowns and wars no longer filled every waking hour, the Tsar's thoughts began to circle back to that silent door beneath the chapel, the one he had found as a boy, when the palace still felt larger than the world itself, the one that breathed faint draughts of cold air and ancient memory. Years passed, yet that memory never faded. He ruled, he raged, he built, he destroyed, and always, somewhere behind his fury, there was the whisper of pages waiting in the dark. One winter night, the snow lay like ash upon Moscow, and the wind moved softly through the towers of the Kremlin. Ivan sat alone in his study, candles sinking into pools of wax. Before him lay a single object, an old, cracked seal impressed with the double-headed eagle. Its wax had grown brittle, the mark of Sophia's generation, his grandmother's bloodline, the last tie to Byzantium. He turned it over again and again, as if the symbol itself could speak. Finally he whispered, almost to himself, "Knowledge does not die. It only hides." That night, he ordered a handful of trusted monks from the Chudov monastery to meet him before dawn. They descended through narrow corridors long forgotten, their steps echoing like distant prayers. The same stairwell that had once frightened a child now guided a ruler who believed himself chosen by God. At the base of the stair, dust and silence greeted them. The vault was as it had been for decades, sealed, unbroken, patient. Ivan touched the stones with reverence. "Here lies the wisdom of empires," he said softly, "and perhaps their downfall." The monks worked in near silence, prying loose the old mortar, revealing the dark hollow beyond. The smell of damp air and parchment drifted upward, mingled with something older like the scent of forgotten incense. One by one, the torches flared, and the chamber came alive with trembling light. Inside were the chests, rows of them, bound with iron, their wax seals still intact. Ivan approached the first, running his hand across the lid. He motioned for the monks to break it open. The hinges groaned like voices waking from sleep. Inside lay what could only be described as the bones of a lost civilization. Scrolls blackened with age, books whose ink shimmered faintly even in dim light, fragments of maps drawn in scripts no one could name. A monk whispered, "These are Greek, but not of the common tongue." Another murmured, "Some words are Hebrew, others none I know." Ivan did not answer. He was transfixed, candlelight reflected in his eyes. He reached for one volume whose cover was worked in gold leaf, faded but still magnificent. Within, lines spiraled into circles, diagrams of stars and numbers. It was not theology. It was something else, something ancient and vast. He closed the book slowly, almost afraid to breathe. "Lock the doors," he said at last. For weeks, the Tsar vanished from the world above. Courtiers whispered that he had taken ill, that grief or madness had confined him to his chambers. But beneath the chapel, he read. He read until his eyes burned, and the wax of candles melted into rivers upon the stone. He read words that few could understand, and even fewer should. He began to make notes of his own strange symbols in margins, sketches of machines that would not be built for centuries. When his advisors begged for his attention, he waved them away. "All the answers lie below," he muttered, "even those I dare not seek." But knowledge is not a silent companion. It has its own hunger, its own voice. One evening, as he read by the flickering flame, a sound echoed behind him, soft, deliberate, like a step. He turned, but the chamber was empty. Only shadows, stretching long and deep. He smiled faintly. "So," he said, "you are awake too." In the months that followed, the Tsar changed. He became quieter, slower to rage. His eyes, once wild and firelit, now seemed to look beyond those who spoke to him, as if searching for something that no longer existed in daylight. The monks, loyal yet frightened, noticed that the vault was sealed again, this time from the inside. When they returned days later, it was empty. The chests were gone. The air, still warm, smelled faintly of wax and ash. No one ever learned where Ivan took the books. Some said he divided them, hiding each chest in a different monastery, guarded by oaths of silence. Others whispered that he buried them within the very walls of the Kremlin, entombed with his fears and obsessions. A few dared to believe that he burned them to protect the world from what they contained. But on certain winter nights, when the wind moans through the Spasskaya Tower, and the candles flicker in the old chapels, the monks of Moscow claim to hear a faint rustle from beneath their feet. The sound of parchment turning itself, one page at a time. And somewhere, in the quiet between the bells, it seems a voice still murmurs, "Knowledge does not die. It only hides." Close your eyes and imagine the Kremlin after midnight. Frost settling on the bricks like a thin breath, the bell towers empty, the river sealed in black glass. Far below the snow and the echo of boots, a silence that remembers. Tonight we follow the people who tried to break that silence, patient men with candles and notebooks, petitioners with rolled maps, skeptics with string and compasses, each convinced that the sealed stair, the sleeping chests, the pages that breathed like embers were real and close at hand. We begin where Part 3 left Ivan, old, troubled, and protective of a secret that had become a refuge and a threat. When he died in 1584, the corridors did not tell their stories, but rumors did. In the years after Ivan's death, a Jesuit envoy named Antonio Posavino walked the palaces with curious eyes. He wrote of Greek and Latin books, of a sovereign who argued in quotations, of manuscripts kept out of sight. His notes were cautious, like footsteps in a dark choir loft, but they were enough to keep the embers glowing. An English traveler, Jerome Horsey, spoke of chambers stored with books and rare antiquities, his tone a mixture of awe and market gossip. Neither man gave a key, yet both left the feeling that a door existed. The word Liberia, was born in that fog of hearsay and yearning. Perhaps it was a slurred echo of Libraria, perhaps a mistranslation that stuck. A country made of books, a kingdom that could be walked with a candle. Famine, impostors, foreign soldiers, fires that ran like foxes through wooden streets. The early 17th century did not treat fragile things kindly. The Kremlin burned again and again. Stone does not fear flame, but bindings do. In that chaos, the rumor of a hidden vault became more valuable than the objects it contained. What cannot be found cannot be burned. Boris Godunov, and later the boyars who survived the storms, ordered inventories. Scribes scratched down lists of icons, reliquaries, banners. For books, the entries turned thin. Ancient folios, Greek pieces, treatises of unknown hand. Margins say as much as lines. In margins we glimpse a hesitation, someone knowing more than they dared to write. With the Romanovs, calm returned in degrees. Patriarchs gathered scriptoria again. Monasteries copied, corrected, compared. The scholar princes of the new century read aloud in small winter rooms. They turned to chronicles to stitch a story from torn cloth. Some said the old vault was only a fable. Yet letters from clerks and pilgrims mention a lower place, a stone passage, and chests sealed with wax. The words are never loud. They do not stand up and shout. They drift across pages like dust in a shaft of light. There were also defections of memory, bundles of parchment that wandered out of the Kremlin, orphaned by fire or favor. A codex here in a monastery trunk, a fragment there in a noble's chest. In these foundlings, researchers later recognized Greek fathers, Byzantine law, maybe a Latin mirror of princes. If children escape, we reason, parents exist somewhere. When Peter the Great pushed windows into Russia and dragged European winds through them, he built a state library almost as an act of weather. He collected maps, instruments, treatises that smelled of salt and tar. He loved the future, and he loved order. If he knew of the old hidden collection, he left no decree. Yet under his hammer, the Kremlin's old bones were probed, bricked, repurposed. New walls hid older walls. Every renovation is also a burial. Catherine II, reader and ruler, adored the idea of lost wisdom. She sent queries, not troops. Antiquarians wrote back cautious letters. Yes, a legend. Yes, older inventories. Yes, fires, moves, rebuildings. The empress, who owned Europe on paper, could not compel a staircase to confess. By the 1800s, Moscow had become a museum of itself, its lanes lined with old stones and newer longing. Napoleon came like a wind, lit the city like a pyre, and retreated under a sky that rang like iron. After the smoke, Muscovites counted losses. Again the rumor of the vault rose, not as a scandal, but as consolation. Perhaps the best had been hidden. Perhaps the minds of the dead still slept safely below the soot. Historians, careful men with fine pens, began to stitch evidence. They compared travelers' notes, palace plans, testimonies from retired servants. They walked the cathedrals and tapped the floors. They argued about etymologies and door hinges. Some published pamphlets with maps. Others simply folded their findings into drawers labeled "For Later." A few names echo. Count Musin Pushkin, who loved old things enough to rescue them from markets. Librarians who knew that chance favors the persistent. They all carried a single small lantern. The belief that a secret survives if we are gentle enough to deserve it. Then came a figure who belongs in any midnight tale. Ignacy Stelletsky. Born in the 1870s, trained as an archaeologist, he adopted the legend the way a monk adopts a rule. Quietly, absolutely. He collected references like seeds. He wrote to ministries and museums. He memorized the city's sub-cellars the way sailors memorize stars. He believed that beneath the churches of the Kremlin, an antique topography still existed. Old galleries, buried stairs, disused wells that could be read like lines in an atlas. His first searches were small and respectful. Limited trenches, a tunnel reopened, then sealed. He traced ancient ventilation shafts, found bricked portals that answered to no current plan. He kept notes in a hand that never hurried and dated each draft like a prayer. Revolutions do not favor patient men, but Stelletsky's oath to the past made him look strangely harmless to the new century. In the 1920s and 30s, he secured permissions that now seem impossible. Work inside the Kremlin, measurements in church crypts, interviews with old sextons who remembered that other door. He drew a network of possibilities, a web whose threads converged under the Assumption Cathedral and the old chewed-off monastery, itself a victim of demolition soon after. Each convergence felt like the hush before a revelation. He did not find the chests. He found hints, a corridor that veered where it should have ended, a pocket of cold air behind a blind wall, the echo of a hollow below a stair. He wrote that the city's subsoil was like a palimpsest each era, scratching its title over the last, none fully erasing what came before. War interrupted him. Papers were scattered. Stones held their breath. After, he kept writing, thinner now, but still convinced. In 1949 he died, and with him an entire cartography of longing was folded and set aside. The legend did not die. It changed diction. Engineers spoke of ground resonance. Archivists dusted letters. Tour guides learned how to tell a story that ends in a soft question. And below, if one believes the faithful, the silence remained exactly the same. Dry, patient, a little proud. If you look at the chain these seekers forged, Jesuit, merchant, chronicler, empress, count, librarian, archaeologist, you notice something they share more than sources or tools. They all have the same posture in our mind's eye, a figure leaning toward the floor, listening for a faint reply. The search for a library turned out to be a school in humility. What we most want to save rarely shouts. Let the candle burn a little lower. We are almost at today. One more part remains. Modern excavations, instruments that see through stone, archives opened and resealed, theories that trace the books to monasteries, ambers, basements, and to nowhere at all. And one sharp truth we must carry carefully. Sometimes a legend persists because it is true, sometimes because it teaches us how to look. For now, sleep with the image of a man in a narrow corridor, Stelletsky, perhaps palms on ancient brick, cheek against lime-chilled stone, listening. Whether he heard a page turn or only his own heartbeat hardly matters. The act itself was a kind of reading. There is a moment, just before dawn, when Moscow feels almost weightless. The streets hush. Snow hangs in the air, as if remembering how to fall. Lamps along the Kremlin walls soften to a pearly glow, and the red bricks turn the color of embers asleep. This is the hour in which stories breathe, and if you stand very still, you may imagine a sound beneath the paving stones. Not loud, not even clear, only the patient rustle of paper turning somewhere far below. Tonight we walk the last stretch of our quiet road. Not toward an ending exactly, but toward the place where endings and beginnings look the same. We have followed the library from rumor to rumor, from stair to stair, from memory to map. We have heard names: Sophia Palaiologina, Ivan, both child and czar, the Jesuit Passivino, scholars, monks, surveyors, Ignacy Stelletsky, listening to walls as if they were seashells. We have traced tunnels with the tip of a candle's shadow and watched entire centuries melt into a single drift of dust. And still the vault remains unfound. Still the door refuses to be a door. It is tempting at this point to make a choice, to declare the library a dream, and therefore safe, or to declare it certain, and therefore close. But neither will do. History, like winter light, is truer at its edges. What follows is not proof and not dismissal. It is a gentle assembly of the last threads, the quiet facts, the credible guesses, the softest legends, and then a leaving, as careful as closing a book. The 19th century, busy and loud on the surface, cultivated a special silence below. As engineers stabilized the Kremlin's crumbling towers, workers found voids where no voids should be, bricked curvatures that did not match the visible halls, stairwells that rose into blind ceilings. Inventory clerks in neat hand recorded cellars and passages without clear purpose. A cartographer complained that old plans disagreed not by feet, but by rooms. "The ground changes as if it remembers other rooms," he wrote. It is a sentence you can hear if you read it slowly enough. When the city modernized new pipes, new wires, new laws about what might be demolished and what must be revered, someone thought to measure the earth. Early instruments were imperfect, but even a coarse ear could tell that gloom has texture. Where the subsoil should have rung solid, it gave a hollow pirouette. Where the foundations should have ended, the signal swam and returned thin. Engineers chalked the readings onto walls. A young assistant traced them with a finger. "Rooms," he whispered, half to tease himself. Or echoes. Then came the deepest upheavals. The revolutions, the famines, the war, and the city learned again to carry its treasures in silence. Archives moved, churches closed, then opened, then became something else. Fire visited, and winter after fire. If anything was lowered into any cellar, the ledger is now smoke. If anything was raised, the receipt is a smudge inside a book that nobody borrowed. And yet, amid this drift, the rumor did not drown. It thinned, but it held its outline, like a shore seen through weather. Stelletsky's files, where they survived, described contradictory doors, uncertain angles, pits that were not pits, and galleries that were not quite galleries. He left sketches of arches whose style seemed older than the walls they buttressed, bricks that did not match their neighbors by a century or two. There is a page where he writes only, "There is air behind." He underlined it once. He did not return to that pencil. If there is a library, what does it hold? The oldest variants of the tale say Greek manuscripts saved from the fire at the end of the Old Empire. Others add Latin codices taken from plundered palaces by mercenaries who later sought Moscow's favor. There are whispers of Aristotle in leaf, of lost comedies, of a gospel in a script that sits between Greek and something older. A more sober list includes Attic authors known elsewhere only in fragments, Byzantine historians complete to the last page, manuals of astronomy, maps where the Mediterranean's islets are marked as carefully as icons. You can arrange these possibilities on a table and sort them by temperature, hot with desire, cool with probability. The dreamers go further, glass that refuses to tarnish, inks that shine like fish scales, a scroll that might be apocryphal Plato. In such dreams the air is always clean, the pages always supple, and the candles never spit. But we know that memory sleeps differently in stone. Where damp has been, it remembers. Where winter cycles often, it remembers. Where men shelter, where fires are lit, where footsteps repeat, there the earth turns practical. It makes heat into water and paper into something that water loves. So the sensible mind suggests two fates at once. If the books remain, they are not pristine. If pristine, then perhaps not books. Yet this sensible mind, if it is quiet enough, will also admit that the past sometimes surprises us with the peculiar engineering of care. Monks knew how to breathe with walls. Vault builders knew how to usher air and confuse flood. Wax and pitch and lead and faith. These are also technologies. Archives far older than Moscow have weathered centuries with little more defense than darkness and a tempered stone. If you ever doubt that a city can hide paper for a long time, consider the little caches that still emerge in ordinary renovations. A letter wedged behind a cornice. A sermon rolled into a staff. A ledger sewn into a cushion. A child's drawing slipped beneath a stair. If domestic forgettings can endure half a millennium, a state's decision to conceal might accomplish more. In the late 20th and early 21st centuries, instruments grew finer. Ground-penetrating radar walked the lawns. Resistivity crawled the courtyards. Seismic surveys hummed like a distant hive. The public reports are careful and mostly quiet, but a handful of images shared at conferences, summarized in articles, repeated without schematics, suggest anomalies worth a slow breath. One looks like a rectangular void with a corridor leading toward a known cellar and then not quite meeting it. Another looks like a fan of smaller recesses, shallow as if for shelves, deep as if a chapel had once decided to keep its sanctuary beneath its shoes. It is easy at this point to want blueprints, but heritage is a pact between knowledge and tenderness. The Kremlin is not only a subject, it is itself a library, stone volumes, hidden within stone volumes, each page supporting another page. To plunge a careless drill through one line might erase an entire paragraph we did not yet realize we were reading. So the work proceeds in the way of winter. Slowly, listening, checking the next step, while the foot still hangs in air. Meanwhile, the legend travels well. Guides tell it under summer trees, and their voices shrink to a human size as they say the title, Liberia. The word is likely a misremembered Latin for books, yet it sounds in Russian mouth and foreign ear like a country, a kingdom of paper, a continent of vellum. The lost library is more than a rumor. It is also a shape where the mind can rest, a calm shoreline along which fear and curiosity can walk together without argument. Perhaps that is part of its staying power. The library allows each generation to imagine a form of rescue proper to itself. For the czars, it was a secret treasury of prestige. For the Jesuits, a bargain chip in a continent-sized debate. For Enlightenment scholars, a chance to remove darkness with catalog numbers. For Romantics, a hidden heart. For moderns, a case study in patient science. For the city now, it is a quiet promise that beneath the stone and ceremony lies a room that belongs to reading. And if the library is never found, this question feels harsher than it is. Not finding is not failure when the object is time. In the calm arithmetic of history, absences are not zeros. They are spaces that allow other numbers to be seen. Not finding has already done good work. It protected chapels from needless violence. It taught surveyors to listen better. It gave the city a way to think about itself, not only as a place that endures invasion and fire, but as a keeper of materials subtler than gold. There is also this. The search has become, in a way, its own library. It has gathered letters, diaries, plans, rumors, lists of accusations and lists of hopes. It has preserved handwriting and pencil smears and margin questions. It has stitched together lives that otherwise would have remained unbound. The last Byzantine niece of emperors, a bruised boy with a candle, a Jesuit peering for leverage, a scholar touching the wall with his ear. We hold them now, side by side, as if they had always belonged to the same volume. Sometimes, thinking of them, the mind returns to Ivan himself, old and pain-creased, remembering a stair beneath a chapel. Whether the chest he opened contained Ptolemy or a plain Greek psalter, whether the diagrams were star maps or ornament, whether the glow was gold leaf or the trick of a well-placed candle. These details blur into each other like the edges of a snowflake melting. What remains is the mood. A human being alone in a small room, leaning over a page that has come a long way to be read, feeling the weight of knowing and the weight of not yet knowing resting together in the same palm. If you have ever turned a page by lamplight after a difficult day, you know more about the lost library than any inventory could tell you. And so we end where we began, at a threshold. Above, the towers. Below, the idea that below continues. Outside, snow making the city new in a language it learned before it was built. Inside, the soft clatter of keys in a guard's pocket, the hush of a curator's shoes, the last meter of a corridor breathing gently as the heat shifts. We do not need to force the door. It has its own seasons. The stones, too, have their calendar. A wall that today says nothing may offer a sentence to another century's ear. A plan that seems wrong may one day prove to be merely first draft. In the meantime, the rumor does a careful job. It keeps attention tender. It teaches patience without scolding. It lays a hand, light as dust, on the shoulder of power and says, "Remember that even kings go quiet in libraries. Remember that even empires keep their best rooms underground. If you listen now, in this tender hour before dawn, you might catch it. The city's slow exhale, the thaw and refreeze of roofs, the fine percussion of snow across iron, and perhaps, far under the chapel, an echo no louder than the rasp of a quill. Do not lean in. Do not hurry to decide. Let it be exactly what it is. The sound that lives halfway between page and stone, promising nothing, refusing nothing, content to go on breathing. The towers pale. The sky takes on the color of paper left in a window. Night folds itself and sets it gently aside. Somewhere, a caretaker turns a key. Somewhere else, a scholar opens a folder and recovers a map made by a man who could not sleep. And we, who have been walking a long, soft road through snow, and rumor leave the door as we found it, and step back into the quiet morning. The lost library of Ivan the Terrible remains unfound, and yet it remains. Not all treasures are meant to be emptied onto a table. Some are meant to be carried carefully through time, like a candle walked down a corridor. Tonight we set the candle down, let its pool of light rest where it rests, and close our own book with a slow hand. Sleep well. The pages will keep. The snow will remember the way. And beneath the red walls, whether in fact or in faith, the vault of secrets will go on breathing softly like history itself, just out of sight, just within hearing, waiting without hurry for the next careful reader to arrive.